Please welcome Charles Ogletree of Harvard University and Neera Tanden of the Center for American Progress to moderate a panel on investing in 21st century cities. This discussion is in partnership with the Charlotte in 2012 Host Committee, the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Ogletree, and it's very much a pleasure of mine to be here once again, in these dialogues in Charlotte, and to thank especially Mayor Anthony Foxx for the generosity in making these available. Let me introduce the people who will be speaking tonight. I want to start with Anthony Foxx. He's served 2 terms on the City Council and as an at-large representative here. And he became the youngest mayor in the city's history when he was elected in 2009 and re-elected in 2011. He's focused on 3 key goals: strengthening and diversifying Charlotte's regional economy, improving the city's residents' quality of life, and building stronger relationships with Raleigh and Washington, D.C. Please welcome Mayor Anthony Foxx. Thank you. We are very delighted to have as well Mayor Michael Nutter. Michael Nutter is the mayor of Philadelphia and the city's 3rd African-American mayor. As mayor, he set an aggressive agenda for America's 5th largest city by devising the city's innovative school reform strategy, vowing to strengthen community policing through Philly Rising, a unique partnership between vulnerable neighborhoods in the city, and continuing to implement the nationally recognized initiative that is helping to make the city Philadelphia become the greenest city in America. He's a former city councilman of the city's 4th council district and served as the 52nd Ward Democratic leader since 1990. He's also the current president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Please welcome Mayor Michael Nutter. We're very pleased to have Mayor Annise Parker, who's the mayor of Houston, and she's Houston's 61st mayor and one of only 2 women to hold the city's highest elected office. She's also served as the elected controller of Houston and a member of Houston City Council. And while all of Mayor Parker's elected positions have been nonpartisan, she served as a Democratic Party precinct chair and a delegate to many state Democratic Party conventions and volunteered for countless campaigns for Democrats. And on her watch, Houston, a Democratic city in a Republican state, is leading the nation in job creation, having already replaced the number of jobs lost in the recession. Please welcome Mayor Parker. We are extremely pleased and fortunate to have the mayor of Florence, Italy, with us today. Mayor Renzi flew all the way to Charlotte just to be a part of this panel, and will have to leave early to catch his return flight before we move to audience questions. And we want to thank him. Before I introduce him, please welcome the mayor from Florence, Italy, Mayor Renzi. Mayor Renzi is the mayor of Florence, Italy, an office he assumed in June of 2009 at the age of 35, after serving 5 years as the president of the province of Florence. He also was the youngest person ever to hold this office, and he's embodying a widespread desire for change and renewal in Italian politics. He staked his political reputation on responding to the growing need in Italian society for politicians to represent the world of the 21st century. His youth and innovative style have made him a man to watch in the politics of a nation accustomed to slow and incremental change. He's a 1999 graduate with a degree in jurisprudence from the University of Florence. Please once again welcome Mayor Renzi from Florence, Italy. And my co-moderator is Neera Tanden. She's a president of the Center for American Progress and counselor to the Center for American Progress Action Fund. She served as the chief operating officer for the center, and she previously served as senior advisor for health reform at the Department of Health and Human Services. She also advised Secretary Kathleen Sebelius and worked on President Obama's health reform team to develop and pass the Affordable Care Act. And prior to that, she was the director of domestic policy for the Obama-Biden campaign, where she managed all domestic policy proposals and served as policy director for the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign and associate director for domestic policy and senior advisor to the First Lady in the Clinton administration. Please welcome Neera Tanden.
You've been busy.
As limited as our time is today, and we thank all of you for coming, we're going to be asking each of these mayors a particular question about some issues involving their management of their cities, and then ask the other mayors, if they have one, to give a brief response to the question that's been raised. And I'm going to start with the first question to Mayor Anthony Foxx, to be followed by a question from Neera Tanden to Mayor Michael Nutter. So the first question, Mayor, is that you've described cities as laboratories. Can you describe what sort of entrepreneurial approach you've taken here in Charlotte to try to make things better for everyone in the city?
Well, thank you very much, Professor Ogletree, for coming back and being part of these dialogue series. And Neera, welcome to Charlotte, and to all of you. Cities are laboratories, and every city is like rings on a tree. You can look at certain aspects of the infrastructure or the design of a city and tell what the leaders were thinking about its future. Charlotte is the fastest metro region in the country. And with that kind of growth, we experience the same types of struggles that many communities across the country experience with absorbing large numbers of people within a relatively contained space and trying to figure out how to get them to work, to play, but also to create an environment in which we're not unduly impacting the environment. And so in terms of entrepreneurism in government, there are several things I could point to. One is transit. We have a 9.6-mile transit line that runs down the southern part of our city, and it uses light rail. We're looking to expand that because we not only think it's a good mobility tool, it's also a good land use tool. We've worked to put dense development around those transit lines so that people can literally fall out of their beds and go to work from the transit. We also are looking to reduce the carbon footprint of our urban core. One of the public-private partnerships I'm very proud of that we've launched in the city in the last year or so is Envision Charlotte, which is a private sector-led initiative by which the developers and the commercial building owners in the Central Business District have all pledged to reduce the carbon footprint of our Central Business District buildings 20% over the next 5 years. We're the first city in the world to take on that kind of feat, and they're doing it because there's an economic advantage to taking that issue on. So we're working very hard to promote sustainability in Charlotte.
And you're dealing with education, jobs, all these things at one time. How do you set priorities in a city like Charlotte?
Well, when the Great Recession hit, I think we were doing lots of things that were relatively unfocused, but there's nothing that focuses the mind like loss of significant money in public budgets. And so what we were able to do is to basically say, look, we're going to focus on education, we're going to focus on infrastructure, and we're going to focus on recruiting jobs into this community. And we've worked on all of those things. In education, we have a private sector-led effort to put $55 million into some of the lowest performing schools in our school district. And our job and our goal is to eliminate, not reduce, but eliminate the achievement gap in those schools and to create a proof point for the state and for the country. So we've prioritized out of necessity, but what it's done is it's allowed us to start focusing on measuring much differently than we did before and calculating those results as we are able to get them.
Great, thank you. And I know you're talking about Project Lift when you
Yes.
talk about the $55 million. I'd like each of the mayors to briefly respond about the issues of a city as a laboratory and what's the innovation that you've tried to do. A quick response from
Sure.
Mayor Nutter and the others as well.
To our two moderators and certainly our host, Mayor, one, it's just an honor to participate in a panel like this. Much like Mayor Foxx, back home in Philadelphia, I talk about cities being the incubators of innovation. And in many instances, because we're executives and have the ability to move agendas forward, on the one hand, you have your own ideas, and as Mayor Foxx says, there is nothing that really focuses your attention more than not having any money. It does cause you to narrow down what it is that you're doing. So you put those two together. I announced on my first day in office, based on things that had happened during the campaign, that we were boldly going to proclaim ourselves to become the #1 green city in America. That's pretty bold in and of itself. The other part of that is we didn't have a plan yet to be the #1 green city in America. That came a little later, but it helped to narrow the focus, get people energized and organized, and now we have that, GreenWorks Philadelphia, and we are positioning ourselves certainly to be that great green city. So I think innovation increasingly will come from cities and metro areas. That's where your economy is being built. That's where the talent is, and people increasingly want to be in cities, and we get to experiment with the authority of our various offices. So I think the future is bright on the innovation standpoint. More and more is going to happen in cities.
Mayor Parker?
I find we're all fairly competitive when we start talking about being green cities. I'm the world capital of the oil and gas industry, and I am committed to being as green and sustainable as any of my colleagues. And in fact, the city of Houston is the largest municipal purchaser of renewable energy in America. Put a period at the end of that sentence. Cities are where people. There are four things that cities can do. Cities are where people come to get an education, to get a job, to find a mate, or to be entertained. And as a city decides what it wants to be and how it wants to move into the future, you pick some combination of those. Well, we're a big city. We have all the big city amenities, but education is not what we do. We are the job creation capital of America right now, and we have focused on how do we build jobs in a sustainable way that is environmentally respectful but not constrained.
And Mayor Renzi, what's your sense? What's happening in Italy? What are you trying to do in terms of both innovation and...
Well, obviously, I agree with my colleagues, but for Florence, there is a little problem because I imagine my city as an incubator of innovation, as my friend Michael said, but we have also the heritage, the cultural heritage of the past, with obviously an asset, very important for the tourism, also for the identity, but is also a risk for our city. In other words, I am the mayor of a community. I'm not the director of Museum Open Sky. And the risk for my citizen is combined together the incredible heritage of the past with the challenge of the future. So in the palace in which there is my office, in the past worked Lorenzo the Magnificent, Medici's family, Machiavelli. Now I work, this is the symbol of decline of the city, but it's also, it's not a joke, but is also the real challenge for the future. So for us, it's important that the choice about sustainability, environment, also the culture, the new ways to live the culture in Florence, but the real problem in the way of laboratory is create a correct relation between the past and the future.
Thank you very much. Neera?
Thank you. And I want to also say my thanks for everyone for being here. I want to actually build on these remarks just by asking, you know, if you talk to governors, they're often thinking about how they can compete against neighboring states, et cetera. But in today's economy, mayors are in some ways competing against the rest of the world to attract talent and to make, to have long-term growth. How much is the balance for you thinking about attracting business versus making your cities as livable as possible to make people want to live there and then attract business that way? Mayor Nutter, could you start with that?
Sure. Well, first, I think, at least in our particular case, the other mayors will maybe address this. I think it's not either or.
Right.
It really is both. The one thing about all of us, if you can't do more than one thing at a time, you need to find another job. This is the ultimate in multitasking. So it is about your city, but when I came into office, there have been previous situations where the city was trying to take business from the suburbs, or the same in reverse. I declared that we were not going to do that anymore, that we don't compete just as cities with our nearby suburban neighbors. We now compete as regions with other regions of the country and other regions of the world. So southeastern Pennsylvania, the 5 counties, Philly, Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery counties, the 5 counties of 67 in the state represent 40% of the economy of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so we have to take that power, 101 colleges and universities in the tri-state area. So we have talent, we have infrastructure, we have affordability. You put all those together, and we have something to offer the rest of the country, if not the world. People send their young people to us to educate them. Our job is to do our best to hold on to as many of them as possible, encourage entrepreneurship, encourage that innovation. So it is about creating jobs, but it's also about creating an environment where people want to place their business or want to expand their business. So I'll kind of close with this. We have a number of corporate headquartered firms in our suburbs. Now, look, if they want to come to Philadelphia, I certainly would love to have them, but in a lot of instances, maybe that's not practical. We've started a new program called the Gateway Office. Your headquarters is out in the suburbs on 200 of the most beautiful acres of land, and you can't move all those personnel around. But a lot of those folks really not only live in Philadelphia, but don't like the 40 to 50-minute, hour-and-a-half commute from Philadelphia out to that work location. We suggest that you open a gateway office in the city. Take advantage of the fact that if you were somewhere else and someone asked you, where's your business? You're probably not going to reference that relatively small suburban city or town. You're going to say, well, we're in Philadelphia, or we're in the Philadelphia region. Locate that office in the city. Your own employees who already live in Philadelphia are going to go to that office. When people fly in or train in, they're probably going to go there for that meeting, as opposed to getting off of a plane and driving another hour out to the corporate headquarters when you can do that work right in town. And so increasingly, cities are becoming that attractive place. We want to create jobs, or create the environment for jobs, as well as support the rest of the economic vitality of the region, because now we're really selling the entire region. Lastly, I know I said that before, if I couldn't get a business that wanted to come to Philadelphia, to come into the city, but maybe wanted to be in the county, my first job is to get that business in Philly, but if I can't, I want them in the region.
Right, because they'll come in.
Because a
come into
Philadelphian can get that job, because we have a major, a great transportation system, and that's a job potentially for Philadelphia.
But can I just follow up on that? How do you politically deal with that when this is an issue of regionalism?
Right.
How do you politically deal with those kinds of decisions when you're dealing with, you're not the mayor for that entire region, you're the mayor for Philadelphia. So have you set up relationships with do you have a formal system?
Well,
How do you deal with those politics?
The beauty of the U.S. Conference of Mayors is that, now here's an idea that I literally took from Mayor Richard Daley when he was in office. He created something called the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus. I was a member of City Council, went on an exchange trip out there, learned about this, and said if I ever became mayor of Philadelphia, I wanted to create the same thing with the counties around me. So I spent a fair amount of time in Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery counties. I speak to their chambers of commerce. I work with their elected officials. So we took the county commissioners of the 4 counties, plus myself, 15 of us, and we meet on a regular basis to talk about regional issues. We're the 4th largest media market in the country. So actually, for some people, I am the mayor of the region. Yeah. And people respond in that fashion. They see me on TV or whatever announcements we're making. So the politics of it are that we increasingly promote the fact that southeastern Pennsylvania must thrive. And our county leaders recognize that the city's vitality is key to their health and vice versa. So it creates an environment where you can actually do that kind of stuff.
Neera Parker, how do you see this issue of attracting jobs versus livability, or are those part and parcel of your work?
First, I want to say that I could give Mayor Nutter's speech. He did an excellent job of talking about how we operate from a regional perspective in Houston. And I'd rather have them in my corporate limits, but if they're in the region, they are contributing economically and we cooperate very well trying to bring companies in. But I'm not in competition, and I'm not in competition with my fellow U.S. cities. You'll find that all of the major American cities, we get together on a regular basis. We borrow liberally from each other. We steal good ideas. We give each other tips, and we help each other out. I'm in competition with London and Dubai. I'm not really in competition with Charlotte. And Houston is respects to New York City, now demographically the most international American city. And I know that that's not the image we have across the country, but Houston is better known across its borders than across the state lines. And so our economic development activities are outward focused, and we build from the strengths of our international community. I have the 3rd largest consular corps in the United States in Houston, and we use them as part of our asset base in terms of reaching out to world companies that may want to do business. Now, it helps to have the oil and gas industry focused in Houston, but we have 2 other major international assets. We have the largest foreign tonnage port in the United States, in the Port of Houston, and we have the largest medical complex in the world. And that medical complex and the port are as much about international business as the oil and gas industry. And so we're not, and foreign companies locating, we're not interested in opening our checkbook. There are things that we will do for economic development, for incentives, but what we try to do is provide a very affordable business climate and a good quality of life, and for an American city, a quick and easy permitting and regulatory process so that companies can get in, get established, and get to work.
I mean, and just to follow up on that, Mayor Foxx, I mean, Charlotte is a rapidly growing city, and businesses are locating here. It's actually, you know, it's a great story for the country. But what made businesses come here in the first place? Was it because you were able to actually say to businesses that you're...
Mayor Foxx. they like him.
It's the mayor. Right?
Okay.
I
totally
got it like
obey Mayor
that.
Foxx.
They want to be with him.
See, this is how mayors always get each other's back, right
He's got
here.
my back. He's got my back.
But were you able to make a case about Charlotte's livability, and is that why investing in the schools is so important, because you want to ensure that you're continuing to bring companies here and they're focused on those issues? Or what is the mix?
Well, a couple of things. Charlotte's actually got a very robust footprint in the global economy. We have the largest energy utility in the country, electric utility in the country based here, and the 2nd largest in the world, Duke Energy. Financial services sort of grew up in North Carolina in an odd way, by the way. A lot of rural people in North Carolina couldn't borrow money from banks in the Northeast, and so community banks developed around the South, and over time they started to combine, and they became what's now Bank of America, what used to be Wachovia, and now Wells Fargo. And that's how we got the footprint in the financial services industry. That's more homegrown, and it's not Wall Street, it's Main Street. What I think attracts people to Charlotte is that it is large enough to have the 6th busiest airport, to have all the arts and entertainment amenities that people want, but it's also small enough that we are relatively low cost and relatively high quality of life. Now, the challenge for my city and cities of our size is that when I look at a place like Florence, which is a city that is hundreds of years older than this city, every decision I make, I want to make in the context of, is this going to stand up? You know, are we investing in transit just as a fad, or is that something that'll be here 100 years from now? Are we building road systems that are going to be here 100 years from now? That's the test of decision making right now. And again, I think the economy has put more pressure on us to be right about those choices.
Mayor Renzi, as mayor of a city that is much older than any of the cities here, what is your focus? Are you really focused on attracting companies and businesses to grow, or are you more focused on creating the climate? I mean, it seems like Charlotte is also particularly focused on having a climate that attracts younger workers and people to want to settle and live here.
For the model of institutions in Italy is very complicated for the cities attract investments with the administration's law. But with the moral suasion, the only solution is use the moral suasion, the soft power, not the hard power, in the ability to call new investments. For example, in the last 20 years in Florence, one of the most important investments was an American investment, GE, General Electric investment, who bought a very important company called Nuovo Pignone, and now in the ranking of GE, I know the Nuovo Pignone, General Electric, is one of the most important company. It was most performed well in the ranking of GE. So depends on the institutions. The only problem, in particular in Italy, is the difficulty to win against the red tape of bureaucracy. And this is a very important problem for us, because also the citizens live this relation not very good with the public administration. But when the public administration with the central government had a problem with the bureaucracy, this is a point of difficulty also for the investment. The company come to Florence to invest for tourism and in general economy, global economy. The first problem on the table is exactly the possibility to conclude in very short time. And in this way, I think for the mayors, surely in Italy, maybe also in Europe, is exactly to be the mayor as a leader, as a moral leader, who help the investment with the attention and with the concrete attention every day.
I want to ask this question to Mayor Parker, if I can, and then ask the other mayors to respond as well. One of the amazing things about Houston, if you look at history and tradition, people talk about a southern city, they talk about racial and ethnic challenges. And what you've done in Houston is to make it a global city, to create high-tech jobs that use immigrants who are a part of it. What is it that makes Houston capable of this transformation, this innovation, to be a 21st century city? And I'm interested in hearing what the other mayors have to say about the local and the national issues. It may not be race and ethnicity, it may be other factors, but how it plays out in other places as well. What's your sense? What made the difference? You, of course.
Happened long before I came into office. I was born in Houston, and I was born into a biracial southern city. It is a modern global city, both by accident and by design. We are now a majority-minority city. The largest minority population is Hispanic, but with Anglos and African Americans about equally balanced, and then actually a very large Asian community, and growing. A lot of that was driven by the oil and gas industry. When I spent 20 years working in the oil and gas industry before I went into politics, and that was 80% of Houston's economy when I came out of college. It is still about 50% of our economy, but we were never a major producing region right in Houston. We were where the headquarters companies were, and we were where goods were refined. We were downstream. And a lot of the, as the oil and gas companies went global, a lot of their people started moving around the world. And the oil and gas companies the international oil and gas companies have been great equalizers in that. The challenge for us is that we attract the best and the brightest from all around the world. We have a very large expat community in Houston. In fact, 20% of Houstonians are foreign-born. But if you attract the best and the brightest from around the world, and you fail in your education system, and you fail to raise your own homegrown talent, you have an increasing problem. And that's really where we find ourselves today. There's a triangle of jobs and education and infrastructure, and I have focused as mayor on working to, it's a little bit like what our president has done with the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, put money into infrastructure, put money into hard, real things so that we're building, Mayor Foxx, for the future, to try to use these capital projects as a way to bring young people who are not currently making their way effectively through the education system into real jobs at real wages today, so that we can hopefully do a better job of educating the next generation of young people coming up in Houston.
I'm going to save Mayor Renzi for last to talk about how do you change the old, historic, traditional ways of doing things and make it a 21st century global city. I want to come back to you, but I want to ask Mayor Foxx and Mayor Nutter, both of you have very diverse cities, and people see that as a problem. How have you made it solutions and positive in terms of what you're trying to do globally and in terms of innovation?
Well, this has some application to the current presidential election. One of the things that we can't do in this country is we can't lay kids off. We can't lay them off. They have to go somewhere. They're like matter. And
They're like what?
matter. Like,
Matter.
you know, and for really several decades, we've allowed cultural rifts in our country to impact our view of education and outcomes that we expect for our kids. And I think Annise is exactly right that long term, we have no chance of being a global country, forget about a global city, if we don't address these achievement gaps in our schools. And I think that is absolutely number one. Number two is, as a country, we don't get the fact that we are in a global competition. Not really. The average Joe person on the street doesn't understand what we're actually competing against. And I've heard it described as the difference between the wolf at the door and the termites in the basement. The average person thinks it's a termite in the basement, when in reality, the rate of change is happening so rapidly around the world, and our ability to keep up is going to be limited by our own political will. So you see something like Atlanta struggling with a major infrastructure investment, and they can't get it through, even though it would have drastically improved their ability to create mobility and land use choices in the Atlanta region. We're struggling with a capital investment program right here in Charlotte, $1 billion just to get our city prepared for the roughly double population growth we're going to see over the next 25 years. So it's hard, I think, and you're right, Mayor Renzi, that some of this is just leadership. It's just getting communities rallied to meet the challenges of today. But I have to tell you, it's tough because people don't always get it.
Let me ask Mayor Nutter as well a related question. That one of the innovative things that makes the difference is that the city of Philadelphia and the city of Florence are sister cities. So there's already a global connection in terms of every aspect, not just the idea of being ambassadors to each city, but the whole idea of the economy and things like that. What about Philadelphia, and how does it work to make it the high-tech, global, innovative city? And what are you doing?
One of the things that, I often say that the great thing about Philadelphia is that it is one of our oldest northeastern cities with great infrastructure. one of the great challenges of Philadelphia is that it's one of our oldest great Northeast cities with old infrastructure. So, you know, but you have to see the blessing in there. So we have a great history. Philadelphia is one of the great international cities. We're not competitive at all, our fellow mayors, but of course Philadelphia had the first consular corps in the United States of America. I love
Did I tell you about the Mecklenburg Declarations?
Well,
Mayor Foxx and I have new cities.
speaking of declarations, did I ever mention the Declaration of Independence?
There you go.
I knew it.
Okay, let's get back
If
to
we get into a
the global
celebrity
picture.
death
We're going to drop the
match,
name titles and we're just going
we'll
to Anthony, Michael, and Lisa. We're just going to go first name.
Chicken or the egg, okay.
So we view diversity as a great strength for us, and that's diversity in strength, diversity in certainly gender and race and ethnic groups and religion and culture. So Philadelphia experienced population growth in the 2010 census for the first time in 60 years. That was driven by Hispanic, Latino population growth from a little over 8% to now over 12%. Asian community growth, as well as Caribbean and African nation countries' population growth in Philadelphia. We've tried to position ourselves as a more immigrant-friendly city. When we had the insanity, no disrespect to anybody from Arizona, it's not your fault. When we had the insanity going on with immigration issues in Arizona, my response to that was to start holding public naturalization ceremonies, and I closed down the Ben Franklin Parkway and brought in 39 new Americans and put up 19 new flags for their countries. So we need to understand that in a country of immigrants, we cannot keep other people out. If folks want to be here. And there's one other crazy thing we do. This is at a national level. We don't do this at the city level. So we encourage the international community to send their young people to our colleges and universities. We educate them. We give them possibly some of the best educations in the world, and then we say, it's really been nice having you here. Go back to where you came from and use that talent to then compete against us and kick our butts with the knowledge that you received here. So we need to figure out how do we hold on to more of that talent. Many of those young people are going to start businesses. Those businesses are going to hire Philadelphians and expand the base. And so it really is about how do we see ourselves as more international cities. We're either going to be a part of this world or the world is going to shrink around us and we will atrophy as a result. So we try to encourage small businesses to start thinking about export your product. We have these sister cities. I've made a commitment to actually travel to all the sister cities. No mayor in Philadelphia has gone to our sister cities. I mean, it's nice to sign the agreements and the documents. You might want to check the place out and see what's going on. You never know what you might learn. So I think that getting that knowledge from an international basis and understanding the globalization of our respective economies is really the wave of the future. The world is shrinking, and we need to get to know each other a lot better and see what's going on the other side of the world.
Thank you. This is
I
my
bet you
last.
get criticized for that travel as well.
I will, yeah. Well, because, you know, I should just stay in my office for about 18 hours a day, never see anyone. I mean, there's a story back home about me being at the DNC. I mean, you know. So, but that's all about promoting your city. And it's about raising awareness of who you are. And if I can bring a company, again, Gateway office, move a plant. Someone wants to, you know, the Mark Group is a great energy efficiency company in the UK, looking for a headquarters operation. They decided to be in Philadelphia. They told me why. They read my announcement that we wanted to be the #1 green city in America. They said if that mayor is that committed to this industry and we consider ourselves a world leader, that's a city that we want to be in. They started with 5 employees. By the end of this year, they'll have 100. This is a great opportunity for us. We need to be less parochial in our view and more expansive and put our people to work.
Last quick question for Mayor Renzi, and then you'll get the final question from Neera. This is to respond to this issue of how do you take the city that you have and make it more global in its outreach. And we've said you're the youngest person elected there in Florence, and you've got a city that believes in history and tradition, which means that the old way worked. What has made it successful for you to think about the new way, and how is that working in Florence that might be a lesson to other mayors as well?
I think the discussion is very interesting because for Florence, the history is not only a piece of the past, but is a provocation for the future. About the city more important in the history, Florence is the city from the city of Amerigo Vespucci, so United States of America come from Florence.
Thank you.
No, attention.
Wow.
And you are very lucky. You are very lucky because if United States of America, okay, if United States of Vespucci are not very good. Amerigo Vespucci is a Vespuccian dream. I think it not sounds very good. And so jokes apart, I think the real challenge is combined together. The global cities in this world is really flat. For my grandfather went to France to make a war. My child will go to France for a project of education in Europe. So the world is really changed very quickly for the times of history. In this situation, the role of cities are clearly the capital of globalization. There was in the past a theory for which the cities after the process of globalization were finished. I think it's true exactly the opposite. A network of cities for the creativity, for job, for the future, could be a great asset for all the planet to live together also in a moment of crisis. So for me and for my city, it's clear in every moment we have a problem of relation with tradition. But this could be also an opportunity when you try something of new. For example, in the heart of the city, in my city, in Florence, there is an old prison, an old jail. A very terrible place in the past. With a long process, 20 years, not by my administration, we transform this place from the prison in a place of freedom today, in a place of young people could live, contemporary art, and in Florence is very important change between, okay, the Renaissance is incredible, but we need also contemporary art, and also a place in which it's possible share experiences for the young people, and smart dissidents could have a house. So this means, is a little just example, obviously. We can use the past not only to remember, not only to become a museum, but this is possible only if the cities work together. And for us, for example, the relation with other cities around the world, United States Conference of Mayors, the city as Philadelphia, is important because every city is a model, is an opportunity, is also a provocation. And I think for a mayor, live also abroad just a few days, fortunately, unfortunately, depends. For a mayor, it's very important because the different experience changed the life of our cities.
That's great. I actually would love to build on those remarks because, and really think about how, as cities are moving forward, what the challenges you face. 20 years ago, there were some newspaper reports about how cities were dying. We talked about Philadelphia was losing population, New York City was losing population. Now, one of the longer term trends we're seeing is that young people want to actually live in cities and stay there. and that's going to have a huge impact on housing, infrastructure, et cetera. As you look over the next decade, what do you see as the big challenges you face? And are there new innovations that we should be thinking about at the federal level or at the state level to address them? Because I do think cities are really, they're really the trends that the rest of the country is going to face. So Mayor Foxx, if you could start with that.
A couple of thoughts on that. First, we're going to have to rethink local government because the lines of political boundaries really don't matter as much today as they used to. So, for instance, in Charlotte, we have a county commission, we have a city council, there are 6 towns around us, and there's a school board, and that's a lot of government. And, frankly, it makes us face some tough challenges when we're cash poor. It also makes us face difficulties in setting community priorities because you've got so many different boards to deal with. And I think there's a lingering question about whether we are aligned well enough to compete as regions if we are still subdivided that way. The second thing is that I'm going to mention this because I think it is relevant to the economy that our children are walking into, which is that I don't think we talk enough about the role of art in the life of a city. I do think that for a world in which people are going to be measured more on their ability to create and innovate, that you need to have the kind of grist for the mill that comes through the presence of the arts, and whether that's in schools or whether that's just having the rudiments of art available to people who want to take part of it. I think that's got to be a part of a city of the future. And then finally, we face right now the toughest challenge in a community like this, that population will come into the region, but it might not necessarily come into the city. And for us, we're growing as a region, but I want people to live in the city. And what we have to figure out is, how do we create a competitive advantage? Is it quality of life things like I said, transit, housing choices, and so forth? Or is it low taxes and you leave that stuff to somebody else to think about? And I actually think it's the former, but that's the debate that a lot of cities are having right now.
I think certainly in Philadelphia, but I really do believe across the United States, the one central challenge that we have still not placed enough focus on is we talk about we want to be innovative and we want to invent things. The only way that's going to happen is if we invest in education. And I think that an effort comparable in scope and level to what happened back in the administration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, where we invested in infrastructure, which art was a part of the Works Progress administration. We put millions of people to work, built this country, expanded the roadway network over a period of time, but serious, true, real investments in education, rethinking, Mayor Foxx talked about rethinking governance structures. I think we need to rethink how we fund education all across the United States of America. We have 500 school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Fortunately for me, the school district of Philadelphia is boundary-wise coterminous with the entire city. So one city, one school district, funded by property taxes. Some days that leads to the quality of your education as a function of what zip code your parents decided to move to, having nothing to do with a certain level of standards. Now, we know, of course, from Race to the Top, 46 states raised their educational standards trying to get some additional funding. And that's all well and good, and that was the right thing to do. But I think that we have to try to set new standards with more equitable funding, with goals. I mean, presently, we're not exactly, leading the world in education. And so, as we did in the 30s and 40s and 50s, with a massive amount of investment in the infrastructure of this country, I think education is about the infrastructure of the United States of America. It should be considered actually a part of the national defense of the United States of America. And I don't know that the military has had any bake sales recently to get any of their tools and equipment, much like our school districts do all across the country.
Mayor Parker, do you want to follow up on that and what you see as the big challenges in the next decade?
I cannot improve on Mike's answer on education. I will say, I mentioned it earlier, that we have to invest in the rebuilding of America. We have an interstate highway system, we have bridges across America, we have water supply systems across America that we haven't put money back into. And I'm in my third year in office as mayor of Houston. The first year, I pushed through a 30% increase in water rates in the city of Houston because we were losing $100 million a year out of our water sewer system, and we are putting that money back into renewal and replacement of our water system. Second year in office was I passed an infrastructure fee on the ballot, and that was actually 2 years ago in a very, very anti-government, anti-incumbent mood, and I took to the voters an infrastructure fee, a drainage and street fee, and said, don't know exactly what the fee is going to be, but we need it. I can't tell you what projects we're going to do with it, but we need it. And the voters of Houston supported it. This year, I'm on the ballot asking for a major infrastructure investment in our park system. And each time, I believe citizens will pay for the things that are needed to support our future. They have to understand what you're spending the money on. They have to trust you to spend it well, and you have to be transparent about it. What we have to get to is where education is just as important as those other kinds of infrastructure.
Thank you. Mayor Renzi, you have to leave now, and I
Yes,
know you have to
I
catch
have
a flight. And is there any final remark you want to make before you leave? And would all of us please join in thanking Mayor Renzi flying all the way from Florence?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I hope for the future, also this event could help us to the new challenge for also our cities, because also for Florence, the new challenge, sustainability, welfare, education, and culture. But in this moment, above all, in Europe, there is an incredible gap between politicians and citizens. Yeah. There is a gap very, very dangerous. And so I hope we can involve in the process of democratic process a lot of citizens. And thank you so much. I'm sorry but I can't lose the flying, can't lose the plane. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Renzi.
Thank you.
As we transition to questions we'd like to ask our visiting ambassadors and foreign guests if they will come to the microphones first. There should be microphones in the two locations with questions. And if there's any translation needed, we'll make sure it happens. I see a microphone there, and I assume there's one on the left-hand side as well. As I've said at these dialogues before, as you think about it, a brilliant question is one that's 8 words or less. So you've had time to think about those questions as you're about to ask them.
We might give you 2 sentences.
Right, right. So we'll go. And then if you want to direct it to a person or to the panel, that would be great. First question to our left.
Yes, and getting politicians to be brief is an art. So I'll try. I'm Paul Dewar, Member of Parliament from Canada, from Ottawa. The challenge in Canada has been that cities aren't being invested in, and it's been haphazard, and from time to time we'll get infrastructure dollars to cities. So my question is the relationship between the federal government and cities. The most recent stimulus we had in Canada required 1/3 of the funding to come from cities, 1/3 from the provinces, and the 1/3 from the federal government. Just wanting to know the relationship between the federal government and cities here. I don't think that's fair, by the way. And what the relationship is, and do you have a permanent infrastructure fund that you can tap into? Thank you.
Or Mayor Parker?
I'm from Texas. I don't get any money from the state. We fund our own infrastructure. We do turn to the federal government for actually, it's the block grant program that is the most effective for our cities, which is direct funding for certain investments in predominantly low-income areas of our city. But it is really up to cities in America to fund our own local infrastructure.
Yeah. Any other quick responses to that question?
Yeah, I mean, I could not have imagined if the program the president put through, I think in virtually every instance, was just direct funding. It was for certain categories and all that, no match required. That would not have worked for us. It's hard to match when you have no money. So, I mean, that just would not have worked, I think, for most of us. We were bleeding cash like everybody else.
Right. I mean, I would say just on the stimulus, one of the big challenges was that states and cities have budget requirements that make you balance your budget. So in a recession, one of the advantages is that the federal government can borrow. So that's why we had 100% funding at the federal level, and to get the economy moving.
Next question to the right. Yes.
Hi, I'm a teen here in Charlotte, and I go to South Mecklenburg High School. I was wondering, what are you doing in your city to influence the teens to do more into the community?
Or Mayor.
I didn't hear the question.
I didn't hear the last part of the question.
Can you say the question again?
I was wondering, what are you doing in your city to influence teens to be more a part of your community?
Young people.
Teenagers.
Needs to be more part of the
More part of
community.
the community. Got it.
Oh, man, thank you for asking that question.
What is that, your niece?
Yeah, I know. Hey, man,
Nice.
I'm the mayor of the city, man. I can,
If you
can
can't,
pay people
if you
on the
can't
way
load
in.
up a
Right,
question, then
exactly. Look, when I started on the city council in 2005, we had a mayor's youth employment program, and there were 48 kids in that program. It was really low. And I pledged to try to get that program ramped up. This past year, we had 3,200. And that's trying to get kids involved in lots of things, job shadowing, internships, actual employment opportunities. What I'm immensely proud of is that with this convention, one of the things we talked about a year ago was that we would involve young people in the convention, in actual real experiences, not like, just sitting somewhere and looking at SpongeBob. And what we did was we created job shadowing, internships, and thousands of kids have been part of bringing this convention into reality in our city. Now that's something, that's not a building, there's no plaque that's going to be attached to that. But I believe that there are going to be thousands of kids who may have found a career path or some piece of this experience that will last with them for their entire lives. And I'm immensely committed to doing that. And those are some examples.
Other mayors?
Yeah. Right around the time I left City Council to run for mayor, one of my former colleagues actually put up a charter change to create something called the Philadelphia Youth Commission. The voters approved it, and by the time it was finished, I was just becoming mayor. So folks got appointed as an executive director, they have a staff, and they are, in essence, the advisory entity for myself and the rest of the government about what we should be doing with young people. I created, when I came in, this is another idea I actually took from one other mayor, could have been Mayor Bloomberg in New York, but a fairly robust student internship program for both high school students and college students. And so we have, it just wrapped up as the summer was completing, a bunch of young people, high school students, dispatched to virtually every department and agency in the city government. And while there's nothing wrong with copying and all that kind of stuff, I address them when they start. That's not what this is really about. You can learn some things learn how to work a copy machine, nothing wrong with that. But I don't want you spending 8 hours a day just making copies. Ask questions, get engaged, be involved, learn from these adults. It really is about that adult, young person interaction, and the same thing with college students as well. So we want young people to be actively engaged and involved. We've extended programming activities at our recreation centers. That was, I don't know if either of you went on the trip to Los Angeles with Mayor Villaraigosa, the Summer Night Lights program. We had a big challenge last summer with some inappropriate activity. I'll just leave it at that with some of our young people. I used some of the strategies that Mayor Villaraigosa showed us in Los Angeles and at the tail end of the summer put those in place to really calm that situation down. So I try to build up and highlight our young people. We've had folks win the Pop Warner football championship. I had the police department meet them at the airport when they got back, I think that year from Florida. They never stopped once they started rolling. We had a police escort from Philly International Airport to their ball field just like we would do with our professional teams. If they were to win a championship, I wanted them to get the same treatment. We need to highlight these young people. More of them are doing more positive things than you'll ever read about in the newspaper. And I think it's the mayor's job to make sure that they're getting their props when others are trying to tear them down.
We all have robust internship programs, and and Houston does. I didn't want to dwell on that. I wanted to mention one of the things that we had that was just phenomenal when I came in was a fellowship program for college students where we paid them a stipend to come in, embedded them in departments, and turned them loose on projects. Unfortunately, it was one of the first things I had to cut in my budget slashing that we've all done over the last few years. It has now morphed into, instead of the fellows who come in and actually make some money, we tried to rethink our relationship with the colleges and universities in Houston and to take to the universities real-world projects and problems that their students could work on and earn their college credit or earn extra credit, however they work it with their universities, but could actually fix things for us. And we have actually an upcoming hackathon. Think about that, a hackathon where cybersecurity is a serious problem. We're bringing the best and brightest computer geeks from the various colleges around the city to come in and test our security. So.
Okay.
Question to the left-hand side over here.
David Lammy, UK Parliament. You've all been incredibly positive about your cities, and I am tempted to leave the great city of London to arrive in one of them.
The question is, which city would you choose?
Here's my card.
We have just obviously in London put on the Olympics, and that was an amazing advert for one of the greatest cities on earth. But you will recall that last summer, in my constituency actually in Tottenham, begun 4 days of the most unbelievable rioting. We are in the midst of a serious downturn. Young people are unemployed. Recession usually leads to crime. Will you say something about the underbelly, the other side, certainly of cities like Philadelphia and Houston? And also, can you say something politically about the difference between Democrat mayors and Republican mayors at this moment in time?
Well, I'll take a shot at the first part. I mean, as positive as we all are in our jobs, you got to stay positive and maintain a good sense of humor. Otherwise, you'll just lose your mind. But all of our cities, I'm sure, have many of the challenges that you speak of. I mean, as positive as I am, and I talk a great deal about education, I mean, I do have challenges back at home about public safety issues and a constant focus on that. I have challenges with regard to young people dropping out of school and how do we get them to drop back in. Technology and the digital divide. 41% estimated somewhere between 40 and 50% of Philadelphians may not have access to the internet. And that is a real, it's virtually a civil rights issue as education is. And so there are big problems and challenges in small, medium, and large cities all across the United States of America. And for me, certainly public safety is a major challenge. The last part of your question, during my time at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, to be honest with you, it's only been in the last couple of years as I've gotten to know more and more of the mayors through conversation, having almost nothing to do with the sessions that we attend. I don't know the political affiliation of the overwhelming majority of the mayors, and I know who they are, I know their cities, I know them by name. I have no idea what their party is because at the local level, we don't have the luxury of taking these, at times extreme positions about things. And in Philly, it's probably not too much of an issue in Houston. When it snows, we're not having a debate about the Democratic or Republican way of moving that snow. You move the snow or you don't. I mean, we're going to have a continuing resolution, and then we're going to have more debate, and then we're going to have this. No, move the snow. I've got to get to work, right? So it's less of an issue, I think, at the local level about what your party is than it is about effectiveness, getting stuff done. That's what we do.
Let me just ask Mayor Nutter if he say a little bit more before we go to the other mayors, because an interesting thing in Philadelphia, having to deal with the issue of crime, is that they created a program to work with the federal government that turned out to be extremely successful, which means the idea is that collaboration made a difference. You want to say a word about that?
Yeah, and I mean, the federal government really, I mean, look, there's a very serious violence problem in many parts of the United States of America, and in many cities, and certainly in mine, that is primarily a black-on-black violence issue. It's about guns. It's about folks who shouldn't have them, illegal weapons, and folks who shouldn't have them. And so our federal partners, as much as we're trying to make the rest of the world safe and build up the homeland, and you have to take off almost all your clothes to get on an airplane, I'd like to be able to walk down the street with some sense of safety as well. And so partnering with the Justice Department and Casey Family Programs, we've created something called Cities United. Many of our mayors are a part of that. We have to address the issue of violence in the United States of America, which is the #1 leading cause to any degradation of quality of life in our cities all across the country. So we have our challenges, and we're not afraid to talk about them, but there are many positive things going on in our cities as well. The federal government has a role to play in the issue of violence, and it could be much more helpful.
I hope you'll exchange information before you leave as well. Other comments from other mayors about how to deal with the crime when you're trying to deal with the issue of innovation?
I want to talk about the issue of partisanship in mayors, and I would agree completely with Mike that really mayors are about results. The trash has to get picked up every day. The water has to flow, the sewer has to take it away, the street lights have to work every day, 24/7. And the bigger the city, and we all represent really large American cities, has to function at a very high level. We are people who fundamentally believe in the power of government to do things. It doesn't matter, you have to believe that or you cannot be a mayor, because it is about achieving results every day. And I would say also that while I do not have the problems of crime that Mike mentioned, I'm a border state, and we have a huge issue with the immigration problem in this country. Let me backtrack on that. I am proud of all of my citizens, whether documented or not. They contribute to my economy. What we do with their future is incredibly important to the future of Houston. And by some estimates, 10–12% of my population may be undocumented. So what may be a theoretical discussion at the federal level is incredibly personal and direct in Houston. So that's a big issue for me that we haven't talked about.
Mayor?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think we've talked about some of the issues lurking under the surface, particularly as it relates to education and political will in an environment in which people are still not fixed. They don't feel well enough yet to take giant steps forward, and yet in cities that's exactly what we're having to do in various ways. I would add this bit of context because I want you to understand where you are physically in this particular city. This city is a relatively small city compared to Philadelphia, to Houston. But it is a relatively big city in the sense that we have dealt with some issues in the past that I think are instructive in terms of how to deal with the future. And I'll give you one example. I was born in 1971, the same year that we had, I know, I'm sorry. The same year in which a Supreme Court decision arose out of Charlotte that affirmed busing as a means of desegregating schools. That decision ripped communities apart all across the South and the North, because before that time you had black kids and white kids basically in different school systems, different ways of life that were unequal. Well, in Charlotte, what happened is, in reaction to that decision, Black parents and white parents met across kitchen tables and they talked to each other. And they decided that they weren't going to let that decision rip up this community. And because they did that, an entire generation of kids, just like me, grew up in schools in which we went to school together, we played on teams together, we learned together, and those walls that had existed for generations and generations fell down. Now, I mentioned that story. To make the following point. I think the reason why the Democratic Convention is in this city isn't because of our size or our arena or our light rail or even our airport. Those things were necessary but not sufficient. I think the reason why we're here is because we're at a point in our country where we've got massive problems to solve, and we can't solve them without doing exactly what those parents did, sitting at the table, talking about how our future is going to get built, and starting the work of doing it. And that's what Charlotte is all about.
Thank you. Next question to the right.
This question is primarily for Mayor Parker, and a question about attracting companies to Houston. You mentioned that we don't ever open our checkbook. Last year here in Austin, where I live, there was a big brouhaha over Apple getting a bunch of money to open a campus in Austin. City government seemed to maintain that it was necessary to bring the company in. A lot of citizens were upset about it. If you're outside City Hall, though, it's very difficult to evaluate whether it was necessary to give all this money away or whether we were just getting suckered on the deal. So for those of us, can you maybe shed a little light on that process and whether you've ever lost any important talent by not willing to give more tax incentives?
A lot of major companies know to look for economic incentives if they're looking to relocate, and it is a very competitive environment. It's a let's make a deal situation. When I said I'm not interested in opening the checkbook, I meant that. We have not offered direct incentives. Now, I do use economic development incentives. There is a tool allowed me under state law where I can rebate property taxes, but the company has to make the investment first. And I really like that because that means that they have put a stake in the ground. They've said they wanted to be in Houston, and they're making a permanent investment, and then they get to recoup some of that investment. The state of Texas, however, under the control of the governor, does have a large economic development fund, and that has been used to seed company relocations around the state of Texas.
Any other comments from the mayors?
I mean, it's deal by
Deal by deal.
It's deal by deal. I mean, you don't know. I have nothing to say about the Austin Apple deal. I don't know anything about it. When you're sitting in that chair, and I think it's much like what the First Lady said last night. When you're sitting, whatever color your chair is, mine's red. When you're sitting in that chair, your folks come in and say, here's the proposal, here's the idea, whether it's about economic development or whatever. You have to make a judgment call. And you're going to get all kinds of advice from some of the smartest people, or you've known them for a long time, or they've been reliable, they're committed, they're all of that. And ultimately, there's one person based on their background, their knowledge, their experience, what's in their heart, what's in their soul, what's in their gut, and you make the call. And so sometimes you may put some incentives on the table because maybe there are other components down the line that are not even as evident at the moment. But it's really about our collective vision for where we're trying to go. What are you trying to accomplish? What is this really all about? And you make that judgment, and there will be critics, because there's always somebody ready to criticize just about anything that any of us do, and that just goes with the territory, no problem. And so the mayor has to make that call, and then you live with it.
All right, question to the left.
Yes. Hello, everyone. This has been an amazing panel. My name is Nick Wharton, Diversity Leadership Strategist with Wharton Associates, and I'm also on the board of directors of the Urban League of Central Carolinas right here in Charlotte. You've each provided very interesting information about innovative economic policy plans for your cities. What can you tell a global audience about your efforts to include women and minority-owned businesses in the economic revitalization of your cities?
Okay. All right, who wants to start?
I was the last one to speak on that.
Mayor Parker.
Mayor's not talking.
I'm happy to talk about
jump in.
Houston. When I came in as mayor, I will say first that I'm an out lesbian, and I am the mayor of the largest city in America with an out public official leading. And a lot of what I did with that information, which became world news when I got elected, was to try to change people's view of what Houston was. And yes, we are in Texas. Yes, we're an oil and gas city. Yes, there are some conservative things, but this is what my city really is about. It is a city with that can be amazingly tolerant of differences. It can be progressive in some areas, even though it is conservative in others. So I will say I'll start by using my own example, becoming mayor, to change the dialogue I had about Houston. I would suspect that if you looked at every one of our executive staff, you would see that they look like our cities. They are diverse, that women are in high leadership positions. In fact, I know in these other cities they are, and that I suspect we all have robust programs for minority companies to do business with our cities, both the statutory programs for minority and women-owned businesses and the subtle things we do to bring companies into the process.
We're going to hear from the other mayors, but our time is just about expired. I hope that the people in the lines will at least confer about what question or questions you want to ask. I'm going to hear the questions for the panel.
I think we have 2 more times, 2 more questions.
They haven't answered this one, though, yet.
So on the first part, I believe I have a pretty diverse staff, folks at the high level. I mean, the people that I've actually appointed, you pay attention to those issues. You want the high quality, but you also want the diversity. So men, women, black, white, I mean, it's a good cadre of folks, and they know what they're doing. They know why they're there. I was particularly focused on minority, black, Latino, female, disabled business activity. We do a disparity study every year. An outside firm tells us, you know, based on what's in the marketplace and based on our contracting practices, we set goals for every sealed bid contract as well as for the professional services. We set the goal, last year was 25%. We exceeded it by, I think it was like 25.7, something like that. More than a few years ago, we were in single digits. I told every one of my department heads, every manager, you will have an economic opportunity officer in your department. You have goals, and you can run the greatest department in the United States of America, but if your economic diversity numbers, if your economic opportunity numbers are not up at the level that we want to be, then we're going to have a separate conversation about your performance. These are serious issues. This is taxpayers' dollars. Folks are working hard, paying their taxes, and people should have equal opportunity based on your ability to provide service, not who you know. I want high quality, low cost, and if you can deliver that, I'm interested in talking to you about a contract with the city.
Thank you.
We're working in Charlotte on a variation of a small business program that we have. We actually had a court order imposed on the city a few years ago requiring us to disband the minority and women-owned business program that the city runs. And the only exception to that is upon a showing of disparity. So over the last couple of years, one of the first things I did was ask a group of citizens to look at our utilization of small business. They recommended a disparity study. We've gone through the disparity study process, and it has revealed disparities in certain categories of minority business owners, and we are now working to revise our plan and our program accordingly. I will add one other layer to that, which is that our program focuses on basically small business contracts. We don't score other things like money management firms or some of the larger volume, larger dollar type business. And I think that is another conversation that's in the future of this city. But we've got to look at everything the city does and make sure that we're doing it. Last point is that this is the first Democratic convention actually first convention, period, to have a stated diversity goal of 1/3 of the spend at a minimum going to diverse businesses. I'm very proud that we were able to do that right here in
Excellent,
Charlotte.
excellent. Thank you.
Can I take this last question? And I think we unfortunately have to make this our last question.
Okay, thank you. What I wanted to ask you was, there was a lot of talk about competition on the national level where you're competing with cities within the U.S., but as we transcend that and move to a more globalized world, what are you thinking about putting policy initiatives so you compete with countries around the world like London, England, or Paris, France, or Florence, Italy? And what policies have you possibly implemented to do that, or what initiatives are you taking to do that? Thank you.
Well, a couple of things. I have done something that Mayor Nutter has done, which is to start taking Charlotte into the world marketplace. I took the first trade mission in the history of our city that a mayor's done to China back in December of last year. And I have to tell you that it was an enormous eye-opener for all of us in the city to be able to go put this city on an international platform and to learn about trade from that angle. And we've gotten several leads as a result of it. And so that's on sort of the sale end of it. I think we've also got to continue retooling what we're selling. And that's why these issues of reinventing local government, looking at education and workforce development, those issues matter because as you try to compete in the global economy, you've got to have a competitive edge, and part of that competitive edge is a highly skilled, highly trained workforce.
I would almost virtually say the same. We are increasingly focused on international business opportunities, in many instances, again, trying to get that office, that plant, whatever the case may be, U.S., North American headquarters in Philadelphia. In many instances, those are also going to be entry-level jobs, and so we also want to invest in workforce development training programs for many who have not maybe gone on to college or university. It's an opportunity to get those folks into the workforce. Technology is a particular focus for us as well. We're developing a program called Digital On-Ramps. That's about anytime, anywhere learning and making sure that across a wide spectrum, people are getting the job training and educational information they need in order to be successful in the workforce. And again, the international components of this, I think, are all interwoven in a way that will help all of our cities move forward.
Yes.
Thank you for helping us keep on time.
There you go.
I want to thank the panel and someone from Washington, where I think, as Mayor Nutter referenced, it may not seem like we're always focused on solutions. It's great to have a conversation with a series of public leaders who are always focused on solutions every moment of the day. So thank you very much. And thank you to our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the great questions.